In a great stone hall, where the fire burns in the hearth, and the night wind whistles at the cracks, the storyteller speaks. Ho, night watcher, draw close, and let me tell you of a small stone that has passed through more lifetimes than the age of all the kings upon this land. The stone is small. It is a deep blue, like the river water at its deepest point, where the light struggles to reach. On its surface, a simple eye is carved, the lids long and slightly curved, the iris round, surrounded by a few short lines like rays of light. No one remembers the first hand that touched it. The name of the first person who wore it has dissolved into the sand. The name of the last one will eventually too. But over the centuries, this stone has rested upon the neck of a girl by the great river, lain in the leather pouch of a warrior in the distant forest, been set on the hilt of a sword in the red sands of the arena, been placed on the silver breastplate of a lady knight beneath the arches of a stained glass cathedral. Each time it changed hands, it was brought onto a different stage. On every stage, people would hang a certain kind of power, a certain kind of story, upon it. Tonight, I will take you to follow its path. No horse needed, nor armor. Only close your eyes, and let your heart settle like the surface of a windless lake. Thebes, the gaze of the ancestors. Long ago, in Thebes, the great city by the Nile, lived a girl named Neferu. Her father oversaw a granary south of the river. One evening, good news arrived. He was invited to a feast at the house of a powerful noble. The whole family saw it as an honor and a chance to change their lives. In the cool, limestone-tiled bathing chamber, Neferu stood barefoot, steam rising with the scent of lotus. Her maid, Khepri, was rubbing natron and perfumed oil onto her skin, washing away the dust of Upper Egypt. "My lady, you will be very beautiful tonight," Khepri smiled. "Beautiful for what?" Neferu wrinkled her nose. "To be admired, and then for people to have serious conversations with my father, not with me." Khepri didn't argue. She opened a small wooden box on the table. Inside, resting on an old lining cloth, was a teardrop-shaped blue stone pendant with an eye carved upon it. "Your grandmother left it to your mother. Your mother left it to you," Khepri said. "Wear it, and my lady will be noticed. Not just because it is beautiful, but because of the story behind it." Neferu took the stone. It was cool and of a pleasing weight. "Why the eye?" she asked. "The eye sees, the eye holds," Khepri replied. "Some believe the eye on the charm will see for you what you cannot see. Others say, somewhere, the ancestors are looking through this eye." Neferu put on the necklace. The stone touched her skin, cold for a heartbeat, then warm to the blood flowing within her. The noble's house that night was bright with lamps from the courtyard to the inner rooms. The courtyard was paved with polished white limestone. Fresh lotus flowers hung on the columns. In the center was a small pond, with white and pink lotuses blooming, round green leaves, the surface reflecting the oil lamps. Guests were washed with lotus water and dried with scented towels, as if shaking off the dust of the road before entering this space, which was both sacred and refined. The scent of flowers, wine, roasted meat, and incense smoke mingled. Low tables were laden: barley bread, roasted goose, duck, quail, vegetables, figs, dates, and pomegranates, barley beer, lotus wine, pomegranate wine. Before drinking, the host poured a few drops onto the ground, whispering a prayer to the gods and ancestors. Musicians played harps, flutes, and drums. Dancers wore gold bangles on their arms and legs, their bodies fluid as water. Neferu sat in a row of seats, not the closest, but not distant either. From there, anyone could still see her, and she could observe everything. Khepri stood behind her like a shadow, adjusting her dress, pouring wine, and whispering necessary remarks. The host raised his cup, his voice deep and clear. "Tonight we celebrate the good inundation season. We celebrate the favor of the gods, but also to remind ourselves, who is a friend, who is an ally, who is trustworthy in the years to come." The words were a blessing, but everyone understood. Every glance, Every seat, every greeting, was a coded sign. The feast was both a meal for the gods and an unrecorded political meeting. In the lamplight, the blue stone on Neferu's neck caught the light, gleaming like a star in the room. A guest turned and asked, "A beautiful pendant. Where is it from?" "My grandmother's." Neferu smiled. "I believe it traveled a long way to get here. I don't know where the merchant brought it from." She didn't know how close to the truth that casual remark was. Wine loosened tongues. The party lasted. People moved from talking about the flood, taxes, and construction to marriage, alliances, and rumors. As the music slowed and guests began to stand and take their leave, Neferu suddenly felt her neck light. Her hand touched her skin, bare. "Khepri, the necklace!" Her voice trembled. Khepri bent down, her eyes scanning the floor under the table, the chairs, the edge of the lotus pond. The lamps were fewer now. Shadows spread. Nothing. "Perhaps it fell into a crack. Tomorrow I will come back and ask for help to find it," Khepri whispered. "No, I must find it," Neferu said, her chest tight. "It was my grandmother's, my mother's." But she could not stay. Her father was waiting. That night, at home, she lay awake until morning. Unable to bear it any longer, she woke. "Khepri, we are going back." The two girls, cloaked, walked through the sleeping streets, to the noble's gate, pleading with the guard. Knowing their family, the guard reluctantly opened the gate, warning, "You must not enter the house, nor make any noise." The courtyard now held only moonlight and a few dying lamps. Tables and chairs were cleared, flowers fallen, the smell of food fading. The two girls knelt, using their hands to search every crack in the stone, every edge of the steps. Khepri suddenly noticed a small clean streak in the faded dust, as if something had just been picked up. "Someone has picked it up," she whispered. "Perhaps a cleaner, perhaps a guest, perhaps anyone." Neferu sat down, hugging her knees. "Maybe it didn't want to stay with me anymore." She forced a weak smile. "Perhaps it's going somewhere where there are more interesting things." Khepri wanted to comfort her, then stayed silent. Some things, once fallen, cannot be picked up again. In a corner of the courtyard at that moment, amidst a pile of rags and wilted flowers, a servant was searching for items he could resell. His hand touched a cool, smooth object, the small blue stone, carved with the eye. He turned the stone under the dim light, found it strangely beautiful, and tucked it into his pocket. A few days later, he quietly sold the stone to a merchant sailing down the river, in exchange for a little money and a piece of hard bread. The stone left Thebes. Neferu married, wearing other gold necklaces. But sometimes, unconsciously, her hand touched her bare neck, as if seeking the coolness of a lost stone. The eye of the kingdom. The merchant carried the blue stone across many waterways. From the banks of the Nile, he went to coastal ports, exchanging ivory for wine, cloth for pottery, spices for metal. The blue stone lay in a small cloth pouch, mixed with beads, bronze rings, and cheap amulets. His ship eventually reached the region of dense forests and low mountains to the north, Thrace. It was a land of thick trees, many rivers and streams, where gold lay in the cold sand at the bottom of the rivers. The Thracians were known for being aggressive, fond of wine, and loving battle, but each tribe flew its own banner, like 100 small fires difficult to gather into one great blaze. In those years, people spoke often of one name, Taras, the Odrysian chieftain. He wanted to gather the scattered streams into one common river, using marriage, gifts, war, and promises. One evening, in the large military camp in the forest, the merchant was allowed to pitch a canvas displaying his goods: knives, bronze mirrors, crude necklaces, and the blue stone set onto a simple leather thong. Warriors streamed past. Among them was Daran Tall, broad-shouldered, skin-smoked, hands scarred. He was born into a small tribe, once only concerned with protecting his own land. Now he had sworn to place his spear and sword under Taras's banner. When the firelight shone on the stone surface, Darren's eyes paused. "Where is it from?" he asked, his finger lightly touching the eye carved on the stone. "Far away," the merchant shrugged. "From the lands of the great rivers, across the sea, through many hands. I hear it brings luck to the bearer. This eye lets the gods watch over you, or reminds you that you are being watched." Darren was not overly superstitious, but he liked the cool weight of the stone in his hand, liked the idea of a small thing remembering for him. He traded the stone for a small piece of gold picked from the river and a spare knife. That night, back in his tent, he sewed it into a leather pouch, wearing it close to his chest. Sitting by the fire, listening to the drums and the storytelling, his hand often unconsciously touched the pouch. If anyone asked, he just smiled. To remember, if I die, at least I die with something that has traveled farther than me. Where? With it, we take to Disabille. Occasionally, Terrace's military camp turned into a great village, full of laughter and the smell of roasted meat. That night, the newly tributary tribes gathered. Drums boomed, wine flowed everywhere. Banners of each group were planted around, animal heads, bones, bird feathers, the marks of the people. Teres sat on a high place, clad in animal hides, a silver inlaid sword at his side. "We were once streams clashing against each other," he said. "Now we flow in one direction. You give me warriors, I give you gold, horses, and trade routes through my land." A roar sounded. Cups clinked together loudly. Then he motioned for his storyteller, Theros, to come closer. Theros was thin, his hair tied up, carrying a lyre. He strummed a few strings and began to sing. "There are gods on the mountains, there are gods in the forests, and there are gods in the small things, like the blue stone traveling from the neck of a river girl to the chest of a warrior in the forest, watching the feast, watching the oath, watching the blood on the ground." Darren suddenly felt a chill down his back. He didn't think he had told anyone about the stone. Late at night, after the drums, Theros came and sat next to him by the glowing coals. "You make me feel tracked," Darren half-joked. "This stone. I thought it was just a stone. I hear stories everywhere," Theros laughed. "Some places say stones have eyes. Some say wood has ears. I don't care if it's true or made up. I just need to know the listener will think differently. If you think you are being watched, you will behave differently." "Teres wants me to behave differently?" Darren asked. "Teres wants you to remember," Theros replied, "that you are not just fighting for your own hot blood, but for something greater, the kingdom, your children, the path through this land. You carry the stone. You must ask yourself, who is watching me? The god? The king? Or my yet unborn grandchildren?" Darren remained silent, his hand on the leather pouch. In the firelight, the eye on the stone dimly shone. Later, Teres summoned Darren to his tent. "Do you regret putting your people under my banner?" he asked directly. "No," Darren replied. "Before, I worried every season about the next tribe burning my village. Now at least I know I am fighting for a common name. But I fear that future wars will be fought for things my children do not understand." "I fear that too," Teres said, his eyes watching the tent canvas flap in the wind. "But the world does not speak in fear. Either I set the chessboard, or I let others place me on the square they want. I build a kingdom so those who follow will have a few more choices. What they do with it, I do not know." He glanced down at the leather pouch on Darren's chest. "Keep that stone. If it reminds you to think further than the tip of your spear, then it deserves to be on your chest." Time passed. Darren grew old, his back slightly bent, his hair streaked with silver, but his eyes still sharp. One afternoon, he sat in front of his tent, watching the children practice throwing javelins. His grandson, a boy in his early teens, ran up to him. "Uncle, what is the most important thing for a warrior?" "You need to know what you are fighting for," Darren replied. "Otherwise, you are just a blade in another's hand." He took off the leather pouch, drew out the stone, and placed it in the boy's hand. "Here, I have carried it long enough. It has seen many things. Now it goes with you. Don't think it will protect you. It only reminds you to think carefully before you rush in." The boy clenched the stone. The carved eyes seemed to look back at him. Many years later, while escorting goods near the Greek regions, the boy, now a young man, sat in a tavern, playing a game of chance. The wine was hot, his head was hot, and he lost. To pay his debt, he took off the blue stone, pushed it toward the merchant. "Take it. It's just a piece of rock." So the stone fell into a small chest again, on another ship, heading south. Rome, the stage of blood. That ship arrived at the city of mighty stone arches, where the emperor loved a great game, Rome. At that time, they were building a massive arena on the site of a forgotten tyrant's old lake. That arena, later, the world would call the Colosseum. In the city, there was a young man named Lucius, not a noble, but intelligent and with an eye for stone. He studied under master builders, learning how to mix mortar with volcanic ash, to be light yet durable, build successive arches so the building could stand against earthquakes, arrange the corridors and stairs so tens of thousands of people could enter and exit without trampling each other before seeing the blood on the floor. One afternoon, walking past the market near the hill, Lucius saw a small vendor displaying some jewelry on a cloth. In the man's hand was an old silver ring, the face inlaid with the blue stone carved with the eye. "Let me see," Lucius said. He turned the stone in the sunlight. The eye on the stone seemed to look up at the sky. "Will you buy it?" the vendor asked. "This stone has passed through warriors, through nobles." Lucius smirked. Everyone selling something says their goods have passed through the great, but he still bought it. He took the ring to a silversmith, had it securely reset, then wore it on his hand. "I am the one who builds the house for violence, to wear the cloak of entertainment," he thought. "At least I need something to remind me that invisible eyes are watching every stone I lay. If the wall cracks, if the viewer dies, because the house collapsed, not because of a spear, people will remember my name in an unfavorable way." On the arena's opening day, Lucius walked through all the arches. His hand touched the stone, feeling the coolness of the new wall. His ear heard the rushing footsteps on the stairs. His eye looked down from the high tier onto the yellow sand, imagining the trajectory of the roar. Under that layer of sand was an entire network: tunnels, animal cages, lifts, and ropes. In a training school for enslaved gladiators, there was another Thracian Marcus. He was born in the distant forest land, perhaps not far from where Darren once stood. But fate pushed him, captured in a skirmish, sold through many hands, finally into the gladiator school of Rome. There he learned how to hold a sword so it could block without his hand recoiling, how to fall so his bones remained intact, how to live just long enough for his owner to still want to buy him food. One day, in the armory, amidst a pile of old leather pouches, chipped shields, and dented helmets, Marcus found a small forgotten pouch. Inside was the blue stone carved with the eye. No one remembered who the previous owner was. Perhaps dead under the sand, their name erased from the list. Marcus picked up the stone. In his hand, the small eye was cold as a drop of water from his old home river. He tied the stone to the hilt of his sword. "If I must perform for the crowd up there," he thought, "then you will go onto the stage with me." The day he was brought onto the floor, the roar echoed off the stone arches like thunder. Lucius stood in an archway, looking down. The owner of the gladiator school had polished the helmets and armor, which smelled of oil and sweat. Marcus stepped out with his opponent, a huge Gaul. Yellow sand, bright iron, flesh, and sweat under the sun. Shields, spears, and swords clanged together. Blood spattered onto the sand. Sand flew onto the wounds. Every time Marcus clenched the hilt of his sword, the cold blue stone pressed against the flesh of his palm. Every time he nearly fell, he looked up, seeing the faces piled upon each other in the stands. Faces of eagerness, faces of bloodlust, faces of annoyance if the fight was not dramatic enough, faces of laughter when they saw blood spray beautifully. Finally, Marcus brought down his opponent. Both were breathing like a forge. The only difference, one lay down, one stood. Marcus looked up at the emperor's seating. A finger was raised, then slightly tilted. Mercy. He let the sword drop onto the sand, his heart both empty and heavy. Back in his room, he untied the stone from the sword hilt, placed it in his calloused palm, and whispered, "You saw it. The arena is a theater. Those above are the audience. Those below are the actors. If you ever come to another's hand, don't let him think he is much different from us." Then he tied the stone to the sword hilt again, because tomorrow, and the day after, there would be another fight. Many years, many fights. Marcus's name might have been cheered for a while, but it too drowned in the list of those who had fallen. Lucius grew old. His back ached every morning. His old knees creaked. One day, he stopped wearing the ring with the stone. The ring was sold to one person, pawned to another. The stone was taken out again, falling into the small chest of another merchant. The great empire also trembled. The stone of the arena was dismantled to build elsewhere. Grass grew where stone seats once were. Birds perched where noble seats once stood. But before everything collapsed, the blue stone had left Rome, following a trade route leading north, where a new era was dawning. The time of full steel armor, stone castles, long lances, and banners on towers. The Italian city-state, the look of defiance. In an Italian city-state further north, charcoal smoke drifted from the forge workshops every morning. The sound of hammers hitting steel rang out like drums. In such a workshop worked a smith named Matteo. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes still fixed on the red-hot steel on the anvil. He changed his grip on the hammer, struck with the familiar rhythm, listening to the roar of the metal, as if listening to its voice. "Not enough," he whispered. "One more pass." The armor he made was famous around the region. Good steel, smooth curves, unadorned, but durable. Lords, knights, even those who wanted to show off, all came to commission him to forge armor that both protected and made people turn their heads. One day, Matteo walked through the market. Amidst a pile of assorted items on a wooden stall, broken chains, rings, wooden charms, his eyes stopped at a blue stone carved with an eye. "This thing?" he asked. The vendor shrugged. "Just a stone." Someone said, "It's ancient, passed through soldiers, through craftsmen, through rich men. I just buy and resell. I don't know anything about it." Matteo held the stone up to the sun. The eye on the stone reminded him of strange drawings in books telling of the distant East. He bought it, took it back to the workshop, put it in a small box, telling himself, "There will be a fitting person for you." That day came sooner than he expected. A woman walked into the workshop, removing her hood to reveal her hair and confident gaze. Her name was Isabel. "I want a suit of armor for myself," she said, without preamble. "One that makes people look twice." Matteo looked up. He had forged armor for many male knights, but rarely saw a woman commissioning one for herself. "How do you want to look?" he asked. Isabel smiled. "I want that when I ride into the arena, the viewer doesn't know whether to look at my face first or my breastplate first. And afterwards, even if I take off the armor, they will still remember the armor." Matteo burst out laughing. He opened the small box, took out the blue stone. On the chest, "How about this?" Isabel looked at the eye carved on the stone. "Beautiful," she said. "Let it look back at those who look at me." Everyone loves to look at others, but few can stand the feeling of being looked back at. So Matteo set to work. He forged a breastplate that fit perfectly, not too heavy, hugging the curve of the ribs without constriction. In the center of the chest, he made a sturdy silver frame, inlaid the blue stone, clamping it tightly so it would not fall out. He continued with the spalders, arm guards, cuisses, knee cops, greaves, and helmet, all fitting together like pieces of a steel beast. The day Isabel came for a fitting, she stood before the dim metal mirror, her helmet raised, her face appearing amidst the steel. "Beautiful," she said. not about her own face, but about how the armor embraced her. This armor can withstand wounds, withstand a sword, Matteo advised. But if you bring it to the arena to perform, remember, on it is not just steel, but an eye people will mention. What will they call you? The Lady Knight of the Silver Armor? Or the bearer of the azure eye on the chest? Isabel smiled. The latter sounds far more interesting. That autumn, the wind was cold, but the sky was clear, and colorful banners flew over the city's tourney grounds. In the stands, nobles, citizens, soldiers, and vendors were packed together. On the sand floor, the best horses stamped their hooves, their armor gleaming like water. Drums rose, trumpets blared. Isabel, clad in armor, helmet closed, rode out. Sunlight touched the steel, slid across the silver frame, and paused on the blue stone. The crowd began to murmur, "Look, the blue eye. Is it a charm or just for show?" "Doesn't matter. It's beautiful." Her opponent was a northern knight, tall, his armor covered with sharp ridges like the lines on a Gothic cathedral column. They stood at opposite ends of the list. The marshal checked the lances and shields, and nodded. The helmets were lowered. The world outside was cut off, leaving only a narrow slit view. The trumpet sounded. The horses charged forward. Wind hissed through the armor cracks. Sand scattered under the hooves. Isabel only saw the opponent's shoulder as a target, his lance as the needle connecting her to him. The first impact, the lances shattered. The armor shook, but both remained in the saddle. A roar erupted. The second time, the opponent's lance slid, striking straight into Isabel's chest. The blow was like a hammer hitting the rib cage. Her breath hitched, but the steel did not pierce. She felt the blue stone on her chest tremble, then settle. "I am alive," she thought, a joy sharp as a sword tip. The decisive run, Isabel's lance struck the opponent's shoulder, the force strong enough to unseat him. The heavy body and armor fell onto the sand with a heavy thud. The crowd exploded. "The Blue Eye wins!" Some did not remember her name. Only the armor with the blue eye remembered the image of her horse charging, remembered the moment the breastplate took the full impact and stood firm. Isabel rode around the list, raising her broken lance in salute. In the roar, she suddenly felt the stone on her chest give a small, subtle smile. Isabel's armor was not just for jousting. She had two sets. The battle armor, little painted, often cleaned, carrying the scent of leather, sweat, and oil. The ceremonial armor, inlaid with more silver and gold, engraved with flowers and saintly figures, but still keeping the blue stone on the chest as a sign. In the great hall with high ceilings, stone columns, and stained glass filtering the light into red and blue streaks on the floor, Isabel sometimes wore the ceremonial armor, draped with a cloak. At that time, the armor was no longer a shield against a spear, but a silent statement. This house once held a sword. This house knows more than just sitting behind a table. Then border warfare arrived. Fortresses, taxes, roads, honor, all tangled together, forcing her husband Hugo to ride out. The morning the troops left the castle, the sky was gray. Hugo wore heavy armor, a polished helmet, a sword at his hip. Isabel stood in the courtyard, her hand touching the armor with the blue stone hanging on a rack. "I go," Hugo said. "You stay. What if I wear my armor and ride beside you?" Isabel asked. "A battlefield is not a tourney ground," Hugo replied, his voice low. "There, the helmet hides the face of the one you strike, and there is no trumpet to signal stop. If you go, the enemy will target you just to confuse me." She knew her husband was right. Isabel nodded. Hugo mounted his horse. The troops passed through the gate, banners fluttering on the towers. At the border, Hugo's camp was set up at the foot of an enemy fortress on a mound. The stone wall was not too thick, but the position was high. Hugo chose to tighten the siege, not risk a direct assault. Blockade, cut off supply lines, let time gnaw at the will of the people inside the walls. At night, fires burned faintly. On the wall, the shadows of the sentries moved like ghosts. One night, A thin layer of snow fell, whitening the ground. From a small door at the base of the wall, a troop of soldiers from the fortress silently rushed down, hoping to surprise Hugo's camp. The sound of footsteps stamping on the snow, the sound of armor rubbing together no matter how quietly they tried, was heard by a young sentry. Alarm! The camp lit up. Fires burst. People rushed out of their tents, their hands searching for swords and shields in the chaotic darkness. In the maze of torches, shouts, and steel hitting steel, Hugo faced the commander of the raiding party. Sword hit sword. Shield pushed shield. A heavy blow slid down Hugo's shoulder. The armor he wore, made by Matteo, took the full impact. The steel cracked in a line, but did not pierce. The flesh beneath was bruised, the bones intact. Hugo gritted his teeth, changed direction, and struck diagonally at the enemy's neck and shoulder. Blood sprayed onto the snow. The man fell. The fortress soldiers, seeing their commander motionless, their will wavered. Some turned and ran back to the gate. Others dropped their weapons. By morning, the banner on the fortress wall changed color. A victory without the need for another insane battle. Returning to the castle, Hugo had a long scar on his shoulder, the edge of his armor deeply dented. "Your armor kept you alive," Isabel said, her hand touching the indented steel. "And the scar keeps me remembering how close I was to death." Hugo smiled, his warm hand on hers. That night, when the castle was quieter of footsteps and clinking cups, Isabel went to the armory alone. She stood before her own suit of armor, where the blue stone rested on the chest like a sleeping eye. She reached out and touched it gently. "If I had worn you today, the dent would be here. The scar would be on me, not on my husband's shoulder," she thought. Perhaps then people would tell a different story about this victory. Isabel took a piece of paper, a stiff pen, wrote a few lines, rolled it up, and hid it in the armor chest. "This armor is not just for show. It is a witness to battles I only heard of, but never set foot in. The paper might be lost. The chest might be opened by someone unknown. But the armor and the stone remained, silent, watching through generations. Time taught all lineages the same lesson: rise and fall. Isabel's family was no exception. Some generations were clever, prosperous, accumulating more land and forests. Some generations were weak, gambling, hunting, building more unnecessary towers just for show, so that debt gradually piled up at the doorstep. Each time money was short, someone glanced at the armor in the armory, saying, "Selling these 2 sets would bring a fortune. Good steel and a story behind them. The city folk love that." Someone else shook their head. "Don't. They are the last things to remind people that this house once did not bow its head. If we sell them, all that remains will be empty stone walls and promissory notes." But by the next generation, the lord of the house was no longer so attached to the old stories. When debt was at the door, they agreed to sell both suits of armor to an elderly noble in the city, who liked to fill his house with old objects to hear them tell stories. The armor was taken down from the wall, wrapped in cloth, tied with rope, and placed on a carriage. On the bumpy road, they did not know the blue stone on Isabel's chest gently trembled with every bump, looking at the sky and clouds through the cracks in the cloth. The museum, the unseen witness. The nobleman hung the armor in his private room among ancient swords, dented helmets, embroidered cloaks, small wooden statues. He brought his friends, raised a glass of wine, and told stories that were half true, half colored by imagination. "This is the armor of a lady knight who once brought down 3 enemies in a single day." No one knew Isabel's real name. No one could still read the lines she hid. Then, like all old people, the nobleman passed away. His descendants did not see the stories in the antique room. They only saw dust and clutter. The city at that time wanted to establish an exhibition room for old objects in its great building. The noble family sent word, "If the city wishes, we will donate the entire collection of our ancestors' old weapons. We only ask that you keep them kindly." The council members agreed. The armor was taken down again, wrapped in cloth, and moved to a new room. Thick stone walls, small windows, soft light. In that room, among the antiques, Isabel's armor was hung with the helmets, swords, and shields of other anonymous figures. A clerk named Pierre was assigned to catalog each item. He walked slowly, a measuring ruler in his hand, a pen in his notebook. Stopping before the armor with the blue stone, he wrote, "Ceremonial armor, steel, Italian style." Approximate period when city-states were arguing over borders with swords, not documents. On the chest is a blue stone carved with an eye. Purpose unclear. He brought his lamp closer, casting the light onto the stone. The eye on the stone reflected a small light spot, like a trapped firefly. Pierre shivered slightly. He told his old soldier friend, Henri, while drinking in a tavern, "I always feel like it is looking back at me." Henri laughed. The owner of the armor is anonymous. But the armor exposes what they wanted, to be seen, to be remembered. You just write that in your notebook, in place of the forgotten name. Pierre nodded. He wrote in the margin, small, just for himself to read. Perhaps the eye on the armor wants to say, "I see you looking at me, and I look back at you." But not everyone who came to the armor wanted to look. One night, when the moon was thin as a knife blade, a thief named Arnaud crept into the building. He heard in a tavern that the city's antique room held many precious things, but they were heavy and difficult to carry. Only the blue stone on the armor's chest was small, easy to hide, and easy to sell to jewelers. Arnaud climbed the wall, used a thin steel blade to pry open a small window, crawled through the dark corridor, and followed his memory to the antique room. He lit a small candle, shielding the light with his hand, and raised it high. In the trembling firelight, the steel on the armor shone like the skin of a dead animal. In the center, the blue stone flashed a single point of light. Arnaud tiptoed, pulled out his small knife, and tried to slip the blade into the silver frame holding the stone. As he bent closer, the candle lit the face of the stone, making the carved eye seem to come alive. In a split second, from fear, from a story he heard, from the flickering light, strange images appeared in Arnaud's mind. The lotus pond and the ancient feast, where a girl hugged her empty neck, the forest night, fire burning and a warrior's hand touching a leather pouch, the yellow sand arena and the shout echoing off the stone arches, the jousting field, horses charging, helmets clashing, the breastplate trembling from the impact. The blade in his hand slipped on the silver frame, making a dry clink sound, echoing in the quiet room like a brass bell. Downstairs, an old guard started. He took his lantern, quickly climbed the stairs, muttering curses at the children if they dared to play tricks in the night. In the room, Arnaud panicked, quickly extinguished the candle, and drew his knife. The silver frame was stiff, the stone unyielding. He cursed under his breath, rushed to the window, slipped through the shelves, crawled down the roof tiles, slid down the slope, and disappeared into the darkness. The old guard opened the door, sweeping the lantern around. There was only his own shadow, the smell of extinguished candle, and a rope ladder dangling outside the window. He sighed. Kids climbing the walls. About to turn away, he suddenly looked up. His eyes met the blue eye on the armor's chest. He stood still for a moment. Then, as if talking to himself, he mumbled, "I have lived too long to believe iron is only iron. Stone is only stone. But somehow, I always feel that eye is not like the other decorations." He turned down the wick of his lantern and closed the door. The room plunged back into darkness. Only the stone remained, cold, silent, looking down at the old stone floor. Later, the city decided that all the antiques in that room would be moved to a new building, brighter, with more visitors. The armor was taken down, wrapped in cloth, placed in a wooden crate, and marked. The stone did not know how many times it was being moved in its lifetime. On the road, the wooden crates shook, were knocked, and piled up. In a temporary warehouse by the river, one rainy night, the water rose high. The warehouse walls became damp. and one corner collapsed due to rot. The wooden crates were shoved, rolled, some cracked, some drifted to the edge of the dock. In the morning, people counted and realized some were missing. But what was missing, or when it went missing, few cared. They simply crossed out a few lines in the ledger. One of those crates, heavy with armor, its wood starting to rot, drifted down the river, bumping against the side of a cargo boat. The boat owner, a man accustomed to finding things drifting on the river, had his men pull the crate up and open it. Inside, he found a heavy suit of armor, slightly rusted from the damp, a helmet dented on one side, and in the center of the breastplate, the blue stone carved with an eye. Heavy armor, difficult to sell, he muttered. Takes up space on the boat. But his eyes could not leave the small, deep river-colored stone. He unfastened the silver frame, took the stone out, put it in his coat pocket, and ordered his men to throw the armor and helmet back into the water. They sank, the clanging sound fading beneath the muddy river surface. The stone, once again, escaped the iron shell it once called home. The monastery. The final pause. The captain traveled to many ports. He traded wine for rice, pottery for salt, cloth for leather, among cities that did not speak the same language, but understood the language of silver. Once, his boat nearly sank in a storm. At that time, in the cabin, he could only clutch the stone in his hand, not necessarily believing it was a charm, just because it was the only thing that did not belong to the storm, did not belong to the waves. After many years, when his knees were weary and his eyes dim, he settled in a monastery on a hill where they cared for the elderly and pilgrims. The last night before he died, he called a monk over, placed the stone in his hand. "This is all I have to leave behind. A stone that has traveled more ports than I." The monk was surprised, but then smiled and accepted it. The monastery on the hill had thick walls, long corridors, and a clean, cold stone floor. Bells marked the hours of prayer. Day and night passed to the rhythm of worship and the copying of books. The monk who received the stone was a beautiful calligrapher. He placed the stone on his desk, next to the inkwell, using it to hold down the thin parchment pages from flying when the wind blew through the cracks. During the day, the light fell on the desk. The blue stone looked like a lost drop of river water on the stone. At night, as he diligently copied old stories of kings, saints, and battles, the eye on the stone seemed to look into his back, reminding him, all the things you write will eventually only be marks, traces, like the scratches someone once left on me. The monk occasionally stopped writing, gazed at the stone, then continued copying. He grew old, his hand trembled more, his eyes dimmed more. Before dying, he put the stone in a small cloth pouch, along with a short note, the blue stone carved with an eye, origin unknown. Some say it has witnessed places no longer in the memory of the living. That cloth pouch was placed in a wooden chest with many other small objects, relics, bone fragments, cloth scraps, rusted rings. The chest was locked, the key hanging in the abbot's room. Many years passed. Those who once knew why the stone was there were now in the cemetery behind the church. One winter, war spread to the hill region. One army passed, then another. The monastery had to feed soldiers, provide rations, and then send off those with injuries. When peace temporarily returned, there was very little left in the monastery's storehouse. The wooden chest containing the small objects was opened. The younger abbot looked inside and sighed. This holy bone must be kept. Pilgrims still seek out this cloth scrap. But this stone, no one knows what it is. An older monk said, but the note says it has traveled far. I think we should let it stay, as a reminder that the eyes of God see all things. The abbot nodded. He wasn't sure where the stone was from, nor whether the stories about it were true. But he liked the idea that in God's house there was an object that carried so many stories of mortals. So the stone was placed in a smaller wooden box, wrapped in cloth, and set on a low shelf in the side chapel. a place few frequented, but where the candle still burned every day. The minstrel's hearth, the story of the blue stone, here, might have ended in silence, if not for one person. That person is the storyteller, the one sitting before you now, or someone like me. One night, staying at the monastery, he was assigned to clean a corner of the chapel. While dusting a shelf, he found a small, old wooden box, opened it, and saw the blue stone carved with an eye resting on faded cloth. He asked a monk about it. The old monk shrugged. The ledger says it came from the hand of a seafarer, who said it had passed through many ports and lifetimes. We keep it, as if keeping a story that people haven't had time to finish telling. The storyteller picked up the stone, felt its coolness, and looked at the eye carved on its worn surface. That night, he lay on the hard bed in the monastery guest room, listening to the wind howl outside the walls, thinking, if I string together the fragmented lives around one stone, I will have a story long enough for a winter night. And so, from the words of the monk, from the faint lines in the ledger, from his own imagination, he wove the tale he just whispered to you. Of Neferu by the Nile dropping the stone at the lotus feast, of Darin in the Thracian forest, wearing it on his chest, listening to the king and the storyteller speak of kingdom and future, of Marcus, the gladiator in Rome, tying it to his sword hilt to remind himself he was just an actor under the gaze of the crowd, of Isabel, the lady knight, wearing it on her silver breastplate beneath the stained glass panes, of the thieves with trembling hands, the old guards sighing, the waters pulling the wooden crates away, the hands of the monks using it to hold down pages, and the stone itself? Perhaps, after the storyteller left the monastery, it still remained on the shelf, beside the candle flame, watching those who came to kneel, unaware they were being looked back at by an eye carved in stone. Perhaps, one day the monastery will burn, the arches collapse, the wood turn to charcoal, leaving only the stone lying isolated among the ashes, waiting for another hand to pick it up, call it a different name, and hang a new story upon it. Or perhaps, right now, somewhere in the kingdom, it lies mixed with other pebbles at the foot of a castle wall, unknown, unseen. Only it remembering it was once the focal point of so many eyes. Now, I look at you, the listener, in the night. The storyteller pauses. The fire in the hearth crackles, his shadow and yours stretching long on the stone wall. If one day, he says, someone places an azure stone carved with an eye into your hand, what will you do? You might wear it around your neck and believe it protects you like a charm. Set it on your sword hilt to remind you to think carefully before drawing steel. Inlay it on your breastplate to let the stone eye look back at the eyes of mortals, or put it in your pocket, taking it out occasionally to turn it in your hand, remembering a story about people who lived long before you. But even if you never touch it, in your imagination it has truly existed. Deep blue, cool, smooth surface, a slightly worn, carved eye. That is enough for it to live another life, the life within you. The storyteller looks at the fire and concludes, the night is deep. Those guarding the walls must have changed shifts, and you have listened to me tell until the very end. That is enough for a winter night. Let your eyes close, and the eye carved on the stone, if it still exists somewhere in the world, then let it continue its journey while you enter your sleep. He stands up, brushes off his coat, and leaves. The fire in the hearth quiets. The great hall gradually falls silent. The story ends, but the stone still travels. And who knows? Another night, in another place, another storyteller will pick it up before the firelight and begin the familiar opening line. It is only a small stone,